Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I thought we would talk about the Bhishma. This is the TWMP, it's also the T90S. It's an Indian T90, which you will find in the good old British tech tree. It's a Squadron vehicle, so that means that you can research it using Squadron RP instead of other means, so you can research it alongside researching all of the other vehicles. It's pretty cool that you can do that in the game. I generally feel like Squadron vehicles should be a bit lower in BR, so people don't just run lineups with just these vehicles, but at least as a complement to lineups, it's really nice. So what is the Bhishma? I mean, being a T90S, it's very similar to a few of the other T90s we have in the game. The T90A is probably the closest one, which is in the Soviet tech tree, and that means that it does have some deficiencies, but also at the same time it has quite a lot going for it. The T90s in the game are ones which have been decreased in BR, have been buffed a few times because of these deficiencies, but I feel like when it comes to the British tech tree, being able to run this thing at 10.7 alongside stuff like the Vickers Mark 7 and the Challenger Mark 3 makes it very, very good as a kind of secondary or tertiary option. So the Bhishma is slightly different from the standard T90. One of the differences is it gets this big old kind of scoop on the front of it, unless you research the self-entrenching blade, which is the same on the standard T90. But if you have the big scoop on the front, you got to be a bit careful because it technically has a physical model. So you can actually get stuck in areas because of it. So make sure that you do watch out for that stuff. The general armor of the Bhishma is not exactly great. It has the contact 5 on it, which will obviously, keep you alive. But the thing about this vehicle is it suffers from what we will call a buff to every other nation on Earth. One of the problems with the T90 series and the T72 series is they have a 7.1 second reload. Now, what this basically means is you used to have a pretty competitive reload. Nowadays, you don't, because the Abrams got buffed, the Arietes got buffed, the Merkavas got buffed. Everybody seems to have a 5-second reload nowadays, so you get massively out reloaded by pretty much everything that's around. So if you don't get the first shot off, you are really going to have to, sort stuff out. They also added the updated DM to it, so it has the Autoloader modeled, meaning that if you get hit in the Autoloader and you don't explode, which happens a decent amount with this thing, because if you don't take all the charges, it obviously leaves holes in it. Basically, you still can't fire back, so that's a bit of a problem with the vehicle. If obviously people hit your upper glacis or hit your turret, it's not going to go through, but it's a Soviet vehicle, so the place where you shoot it is always the same. Lower glacis, driver's port, cannon breach, and once you kind of get that sorted, that's pretty good. The one thing I will say the armor is pretty nice against is CAS. The contact 5 ERA does explode and stop some rounds coming in, so at least it takes like 2 or 3 kind of munitions to hit you to do permanent damage, which is something that I found pretty nice with this thing. So the gun, the 125mm, it does have a very good round on it, the 3BM42, which at this BR is good enough to basically deal with anything you're going to run into. It's also a rank 1 modification, which makes a huge difference on this thing. Basically, you don't have to deal with that heat FS grind for too long. Usually on a vehicle which only has access to one APFSDS, they sometimes make it so you have to kind of grind this out at rank 3. So the fact that you get it at rank 1 makes it so much easier. And once again, the 3BM42 is completely fine to go through. You also have access to some other interesting rounds. So rank 3, you have a ATGM. It's a tandem warhead one, which means that it can overpressure stuff pretty aggressively, and I think it's worth at least having a look at certain ranges. But generally, the 3BM42 with the laser rangefinder will be able to deal with anything you need to. The other round is this HETF round, so this is a high explosive with a timed fuse, and this means that you can deal with helicopters, this means that you can deal with a bunch of other things, but the problem is the reload being quite long. Usually by the time you hear helicopters or see them coming in, it's a little bit late. The gunner also has very good thermals on this thing. It has at least Gen 2 thermals, so you can see kind of into next week, which is really nice. So that means that the gun can be very effective at longer ranges, especially with the laser rangefinder. This gun, though, has a problem, and this is one of the things that annoys me a lot about Soviet vehicles. It's something that is present on stuff like the 2S25, it's present on a lot of the T72s and many other vehicles. Its vertical guidance speed is awful. Like, the targeting speed in general of this gun is terrible. It is 20.4 degrees per second of turret rotation speed, unless you have an ace crew where it gets up to 24. The vertical is 3 degrees per second. 3! Which means that the gun is just not going up or down at any speed whatsoever. So if you have to change on the vertical plane your gun, which obviously you do in battle, and if you're trying to like shoot down helicopters with the HETF round, it just takes so long to get there. Just for a comparison, so the Bhishma, 20 degrees per second on the horizontal guidance speed, and also 3 degrees on the vertical. If you have a look at, let's say, I don't know, an Abrams, right? Because obviously an Abrams is at the same BR as it's the standard Abrams, which is there. The targeting speed on the gun, 28 degrees per second on the horizontal guidance speed. That's without any crew skills. It gets up to 40 degrees when it is aced, but the big one is the vertical. It is 17 degrees per second stock, a vertical guidance speed, and 24 degrees when it is aced. So imagine having 3 degrees of vertical and then going to 24. It's nuts at the end of the day. And this thing is at 10.7. So targeting speed on the gun is so slow compared to all of its competition. You have to be very careful how you play this thing because of that. And you have to use your tracks a lot to be able to rotate yourself around the place, hammer things and then go forward. And you have to rely on your armor, which can work if people don't know where to shoot you, but most people know where to shoot you. Now, the other problem that this machine has, it has a 1,000 horsepower engine, which is not too bad. It actually does go forward quite well, but it can't reverse. It's only got 4 kilometers an hour backwards. So this basically means once you're in combat, you are basically committed to that combat. So it's all forward, no backwards. You do have some smoke grenades to reposition. You do have a nice 12.7 millimeter to set it up to. So you do have like options when you're in that fight, but you've got to understand you have to pick your fight very, very well in order to use this thing and kind of go forward. And that, to me, is just really annoying for this type of vehicle, especially at 10.7, where you have all of these hypermobile vehicles, and also in your lineup, you have stuff like the Vickers Mark 7 that is so much better at dealing with so many enemies because of its playstyle. Think about the Vickers Mark 7. Much more powerful engine, really good transmission, has a better reload, much better targeting speed, has technically, I think the round is slightly worse, if not slightly better. Like, they're very close. Yeah, it's got a slightly better round than the Bhishma, so it does everything better than it, apart from the fact it has a larger silhouette. So if you can play around that, like, you're good to go. And then you have the Challenger Mark 3, which is at the same BR, which has a better reload, better targeting speed, more gun depression, more mobility, mobility surprisingly, and then also at the same time has access to the thermals and all of the other stuff. So the Bhishma, because of its fundamental issues, it's very hard to see this as more than a secondary or tertiary MBT to the ones that you have in the tech tree, which is why, as a squadron vehicle, it works pretty well, because all you've got to do as a squadron vehicle is be a backup to these things. And since it's okay against CAS because of the additional ERA that it has on it, it's actually not bad as a second or third spawn alongside stuff like the Vickers or the Chally. But as a sole vehicle to play, if you are researching this just to play it by itself, which I know with squadron vehicles can be a problem with people, you will have a bad time, because this is not a solo carry vehicle. It has too many issues with it, and it is too designed for a specific playstyle compared to others. So just take that into account while you're trying to play this thing. that you need to run it with this lineup. This cannot by itself carry matches over and over and over again. Instead, you will have a pretty rough time and it won't be very fun. It took 83 battles to spade this thing. We had 173 ground kills, 68 deaths, and a 59% win rate. So basically a 2.5 to 1, 60% win rate, which around this BR is pretty standard for me. Like my Vickers Mark 7 has a 57% win rate, my Challenger Mark 3 has a 61% win rate, and generally, you know, we do pretty good with these. So the lineup itself works very nicely. Another thing is it got massive buffs to the AA, so now you can bring the Osa, you can bring the Strela, and also the Desert Warrior. So this BR is actually really, really nice, at least from a ground point of view for Britain. I would give it a go, but make sure to do it as a full lineup. Don't do it just as the Bhishma, because otherwise you'll have a tough time. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.